Hi guys. Today we are going to not learn about Punnett squares, but we're going to learn about the concepts that you need to learn about before you can do Punnett squares. So it's a little bit of an intro lesson today. Now, the first thing to copy down here, so each individual gets half of their genetic information from their mother and half of their genetic information from their father. So this is stuff that hopefully you guys already know. So half of it comes from your mom, half comes from your dad, and these are your biological parents, right? The male and the female provide half of the genetic code. Now, Punnett squares are a quick and easy way to determine what the offspring, and offspring is just another word for children, will look like. Now, before you can do a Punnett square, though, you need to know information about both parents in order to create one. So this would likely have to be given to you in a question. So it's based on probability, so it's not 100% accurate. This is sort of our best guess in terms of how the genetics are going to work. Okay, now part of a gene, DNA. Oh, hold on, sorry. Shoot. Just a minute here. Okay, an allele. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. So, hold on. There we go. Okay, so the allele. The allele is part of a gene or DNA that controls a specific trait. So we've seen that word before, and we're going to talk about them more. So everyone has two alleles for each trait. So you've got one from each of your parent. We use letters to represent the alleles. Okay, so you can pause the video and put all three of those, these dashes here, all three of these points in your notes. Now, each individual needs to have two alleles for each trait because they get one from each parent. So the mother gives the child one allele, the father gives the child one allele. So every individual has two alleles for every trait in the cell, for each trait in every cell of their body except for the sex cell. So this is the exception for that. That would be the sperm and the egg. Which only have one because they have half of the genetic information. So these are the gametes, right? So instead of 46 chromosomes, they only have 23. So they've got half. Half the chromosomes and half of the alleles for each. Now, an allele can either be dominant or recessive. So we're going to learn those two terms here. So right now, I want you to just take a look at this picture here, and how many of you can roll your tongue? So if you can roll your tongue, you're gonna look like that person. So that's me. I can do that. I can roll my tongue. People who cannot roll their tongue, try as hard as they can. They are not going to be allowed to do it, or they're not going to be able to do it. Now, weirdly, this is because of an allele. There's an actual allele for tongue rolling. So, and we're going to talk more about it later, whether it's dominant or recessive. But just keep this in your mind. So decide or figure out now which one you are. If you are in the tongue rolling camp or the non-tongue rolling camp. Hold on one second here. Okay, dominant. So for dominant traits, these are known as the stronger allele. So they're the ones that are going to take priority. They're represented by uppercase letters. So uppercase letters are capital. So these are capital letters, okay? So A, B, T, etc. Any letter of the alphabet can be them. Now this is recessive here. I'm gonna write that down. Okay, so these are the recessive traits here. That's a V and an E. Recessive traits are known as the weaker allele, and they're represented by lowercase letters. So these are our little letters here. So not the capital, the little ones. Now, each allele can be either dominant or recessive. And there's three possibilities. So for each trait that you have, each trait, there's a dominant allele and there's a recessive allele. Now, you could have two dominant traits. So what that means is you get one capital T, one dominant from your mom, one capital or dominant trait from your mother. So you can have two dominant traits like this. In this case, the dominant trait will show. So whatever is dominant is going to show. This one, you could have two recessive alleles. That means you get one little t from your mom, one little t from your dad. In this case, the recessive trait will show. This is the weaker allele. Now, you could have one dominant and one recessive allele. So this would be one of your parents gives you a capital letter, or the dominant trait, one of your parents gives you the recessive trait. In this case, sometimes people think that you get like a medium, that would be a medium between them. That's not true. When you get this, the dominant trait wins because it is the stronger allele. So even though you have one of each, the dominant trait is going to win and will show itself as presenting. Hold on one second here. Okay, so we have two things called, I'm going to go ahead just a minute. I'm going to come back for that after. Hold on. Now, the trait for tongue rolling is dominant. So if you can roll your tongue, that is a dominant trait. So I'm going to give it, let's give it the tongue, letter T. So if you can roll your tongue, that means that is a dominant trait, capital T. So you could be either TT or you could be capital lower. Both of those types, so both this where you've got two capital letters or a capital and a lowercase. This one here is going to be a dominant and dominant. This one dominant recessive. Both of those people can roll their tongue. However, this one, this is a recessive trait, so that's going to be the lowercase. So if you can't roll your tongue, that means that you got both alleles that are recessive, both of the weaker alleles. So both of your parents passed on a lower T to you, or a recessive allele for you. Okay, come back to that after. Okay, so this is the heading there is genotype. So we have to distinguish between genotype and phenotype. Genotype is known as the genetic makeup, so the DNA of an individual. It's represented by two letters. So you could have, this is from one from each parent. So this one is a dominant dominant, this one dominant recessive, dominant dominant, recessive recessive. There's, this can go on forever. So genotype represented by two letters. So it tells what you got from both of your parents. Now, this is phenotype up here. I should have lowered these before I started here. Phenotype is what an individual actually looks like. So for example, this person in the picture here is tall, brown eyes, and blonde hair. So we can make guesses about what her genotype would be. So that would be her actual genetics, what's on the DNA. But the phenotype is what something actually looks like, or how the trait presents itself. Now, going back here then, if we looked, the genotypes for tongue rollers, these are my tongue rollers, the genotypes could be TT or TT. Over here, the genotype for the non-tongue roller has to be lowercase, lowercase, okay? So genotypes for tongue rollers can be one of those two. For non-tongue rollers has to be lowercase, lowercase. Now, phenotypes are different. We're only going to have two different phenotypes. And what are the phenotypes? Tongue roller or non-tongue roller. So there's only two different phenotypes, but we've got three different types of genotypes that you can have. And this will make sense more as we go through with more examples, okay? So genotype versus phenotype, dominant, recessive. You might have to watch this video a couple times for it really to sink in here. We're going to be going through the coin toss baby activity now. So I'm going to do a little video, a separate video on how to do that assignment, just because sometimes people get confused with it. And you're going to have to draw yourself a picture of your cute little babies. You're going to make 2 babies in this assignment. So watch the video for that, and I'll post that, and then we can go through it the next day. Okay, thanks guys.